Okay. We're live in the sense that we are putting to YouTube. Whether or not they are receiving it is unknown. So, all right. YouTube is acting funky today. Good morning, everybody.
Well, you
YouTube
already screwed
ruined
that up.
Yeah, YouTube ruined my good morning joke. I was literally gonna go live and then let Alexis and Trail Dust just sit there and chat amongst themselves while I stared at the camera drinking coffee for the first 35 minutes. But I mean, one of them like slow jokes that some people would laugh at. Anyway,
Right underneath our faces, it says solid forge fuels. So.
Yeah, that's a big problem because that's not what we're talking about today. Yeah, let me it's real easy. Nah.
You do that while I go through the list here. In the chat today, we have John Burnell. He says first. Trail Desk, of course. Kevin is in the chat. We got Rob Huff. I ain't first, but I ain't last. There you go, Ricky Bobby. Shane Lalone, Opert Forge, greeting. You get all moved over to Texas yet there, Shane? Did you become a Texas transplant? Who else? We got Rob Bortigov. How you doing this morning? And Ben Toombs is in the house. Short man bringing in the rear.
Taking it in the rear. Never mind.
Yeah. Come on now. You don't have to be like that. Robert Whitney, good morning. Glad to see you here this morning. And Speargrass Forge, what's going on? Adam, glad you could pop in for a hot minute during your lunch break. Yeah. And if any of y'all didn't notice, today is Robert Lonis's birthday. Oh, Treadle Shed. So if he pops in, be sure to tell Bobby hi. I mean, fuck. Be sure to tell Bobby happy birthday. Damn. Use your words, Alexis. Jack Pine,
all of
blacksmithing.
those.
Glad to see you, Jack. All right, did you get? Oh, there we go. Non-solid forge fuels. That's what we're talking about today. So there's our intros as far as the people that. Why did we hit the like? Yeah, I know, right? Where's the dislike button at?
So everybody knows, and so I don't feel bad. We literally before the show talked about screwing up the beginning of the show. So Now, admittedly, we had a planned technical difficulty, but then we had an actual technical difficulty, and it was like, oh come on.
We're all having a conversation, me and Trail Dust and John Burnell, and Yama's like, I'm just gonna go live at just at a random time, and it's like, all right, go ahead, and then wait, it's not working. Wait, it's not working, and I was like, wait, YouTube's not working. Hold on, let me go live on my channel right quick, and it was a refresh issue. So we got her figured out, but the let's pretend there's a technical issue turned into there's actually a technical issue. But on that note, we've got pretty much people in the chat that are going to be here for the next couple minutes, anyways. Yamez, how was your week this week?
Oh, it was good. I had a lot of. It was another one of those weeks at work where I was driving around a lot, doing a lot of, a lot of little quick things all over the county, and. Okay. For some reason, 2 jobs or 2 estimates or whatever, where I guess they called us and thought that we installed security systems and did phone and Ethernet networking and 5G technician stuff, and it's like, we're electricians. That's a subset of electrical that you want somebody to do that, call Bob, and it's like, and I'm explaining it to the customers, and they're like, yeah, but, and I'm like, no, but I can run the wires for that. She's like, yeah, can you do that? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. And she goes, but then how much would the setup be for installing the cameras and the alarms and everything? Can I get a quote for that too? And I'm like, we don't do that. She says, okay, so who's going to program that? Me? And I'm like, I'm not going to program it. You know, like you're better off like calling somebody who specializes in that. She's like, yeah, but don't you guys do that? I'm like, no. It literally is a back and forth, almost like a freaking vaudeville bit. It was hilarious. And then the other one was like, my phones don't work. I'm like, okay. Call a phone company, it's like, or the internet. I'm like, oh, why are you calling me for that? Come on. And then another one, oh, plumbers. If you're a plumber, I apologize for this next segment.
Oh shit!
Gotta,
Sorry, I'm doing shit. I'm not. I'm like.
you got attacked by a horde of zombies?
No, 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 no. I'm like I'm messing with the YouTube thing, and I was about to start doing shit as Island Metal Forge, and I'm like, whoa, 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 hold on, we're live right now.
Yeah. Um, no, lady's water heater stopped working at one of her rentals. She shows up, and she turns the water heater on to activate it before the renters come in, and blah blah blah. And the hot water didn't kick on, after a couple of hours. So she called a plumber. The plumber, came by, and said, nope, it's definitely an electrical issue. The breaker's bad. Yeah, you have him switch it. And it's like, I look at it, I'm like, there is zero electrical problems wrong here. I'm like, did he like check the elements and check the thermostat and all that? She goes, no, he just walked in the house and said it was an electrical issue. I'm like, I hope he didn't charge. She's like, dude charged her $300 for that. And it's like, you know what? Get wrecked, plumbers. Um, get wrecked.
You know,
Uh,
when I was a plumber, when people would call us out for something, because there's like a point at which, okay, this problem belongs to the city or this problem belongs to the homeowner. You know what I
mm-hmm.
mean? And if we showed up and we're within short order able to determine this problem belongs to the city, not us. You need to call them. We didn't. We'd be just like, have a nice day. We're not
Yeah,
even gonna,
that,
it's
that's
15 minutes. Don't.
well. I went through the effort, or I went through the process with the people there, opening up the panel, opening up the disconnect and everything, doing the proper test, showing them like, okay, here's what you're supposed to, like, here's how this works, here's why it works. You've got this reading off of these connections, you've got this reading off of these connections, and here could be the different things that go wrong with a water heater, and no, I'm not qualified to open it up and change the elements or open it up and change thermostats or read them to tell if they're bad or not, about an hour or so to go over all that with them. And, it's like, because, and we didn't charge them, it's like, yeah, we're not going to charge you for that. I mean, we didn't do anything. We explained to you how you got screwed over by a plumber, I said, call the plumber back and tell him, you want those heating elements exchanged for free.
For sure.
Like he had them scared that their house was going to burn down because it's like, oh yeah, you've got electrical issues. It's like, give me a break. Plumbers can, yeah. Anyway, so that was my week. Yeah, been doing a lot of promotional stuff for other things, but like, yeah, and it's also a community weekend for uh the game that I play, the Sea of Thieves. So if any of you play Sea of Thieves, I'm rocking out in a lot of high seas adventures.
Out with your out.
Yeah, absolutely. Sales down. Oh, my ship. Uh, Rob Huff, you would love this. The name of my ship in Sea of Thieves is Hephaestus or Hephaestus. You know, so yeah, and I've got burning sails on it, and like burning decorations on it. Yeah, little thing that I didn't even think about. Yeah, I basically named it after our the god of forges, the god of metalworking.
Ben Toombs, city right away, working for the city water department. I see that daily. People call us saying that our hot water main stopped working. I find
Yeah,
that hilarious, but like but it's also so sad. I mean, it is really disappointing that he's probably not making that up.
I
And
know.
it's just like, how can any living being be that oblivious to the world around them? I mean,
No, hold
oh,
on.
I'm a gamer. I don't know anything about water. I mean, like,
I
or
got that
whatever. I mean,
topped.
like,
I got that topped. This was years ago
hey,
back in
Ben,
Illinois.
hold on, Ben, there's no such thing as a hot water heater. You don't heat up hot water. It's just a water heater. Just
I
saying.
actually do. I put hot water in my coffee maker to heat up the hot water. So
If you put hot water in your coffee maker, it won't work.
it did. That's where I got this. But anyway, no, I had a customer back in Illinois, called us freaking out. I'm talking like they called. Jay was like, "What the hell?" A plumber was there checking on something and let them know, "Oh, you have an electrical leak." And we got there, and I shit you not, they had a bucket under the panel.
Oh,
There
anyway,
was nothing wrong with their panel. Okay, go ahead.
so I had a fairly eventful week, I guess. There's going to be some things that I forgot about that I'm going to go a little bit later on in the show. I'm going to go, oh, there's this, oh, there's that, but it doesn't really matter. Just little snippets of things. Uh, because as we've been sitting here going, I've been thinking, oh, I need to mention that. Oh, I need to mention that. Oh, I need to mention that, and I don't remember what any of those things are. But in the meantime, since last Sunday, let's see. Yeah, no, I don't know. I had a hair dyeing party at my house and got new color, and I mean, it looks blue on here, but it's not. It's actually a nice purple. I don't know why, and it's not on Yama's end because even on my end it shows a blue. I don't know why, but
I could change that.
well, no, but I mean, I'm just saying it's like I
Mhm.
don't. It's that my camera's picking it up wrong. Because like whatever. And anyways, I'm getting confused because I see Yamez on the screen throwing his hands up, and I'm like, oh wait, that was 15 seconds ago. But no, I came back home from days off on Tuesday night, or no, Wednesday morning. I had my first laser hair removal appointment Wednesday morning, or it was actually a consultation and then a free session. And gave me the consult. I decided to spring for it, and I financed that baby out for 24 months. Uh, so I got that going on. 9 more to go, and then I've got lifetime touch up on it. So gonna get rid of all of this. Yay for me. Not so yay for my bank account, but it is what it is. Um, let's see. Oh yeah, I when I was home, I went and bought a new water heater, and yeah, I got a big what do you call it?
Yeah, careful there.
Careful there. Instant water heater. Yeah, shut up, young man. The instant one, the tankless water heater. I got a 27 kilowatt hour tankless water heater, good for like 5.8 gallons per minute. That is like at maximum heat, right? And so that means I could run every hot water faucet in my house full blast indefinitely and never run out of hot water, right? That's pretty awesome. Did not even occur to me what the electrical requirements for this damn heater were going to be. And so I get it home, I open it up, and the first thing I do, very unmanlike, is bust open the instruction booklet and go to read the instructions from front to back before I even do anything else. And the first worrying thing is I now need, in order to run this heater, 6 40-amp breakers, like
Yep.
3 double. And I'm just like, wait, what? Are you like my current water heater is sitting on a double 25, and I'm just like, the wire that's run from that double 25 breaker to my water heater isn't even big enough to run one of the elements on this new water heater. So like I got to run all. Oh man. So yeah, so like I'm $1,000 deep into this water heater, and I haven't even begun the install yet. I had to get new outside main breaker boxes. I wound up buying 40 foot of big ass wire, and I mean, and like 9 foot of smaller wire that will run each of the from the breaker to the water heater. But it's just this whole process. And so when I go home next week, I'm going to start from the water heater end. I'm going to install it on the wall, and to where so that when I get the whole thing done, all I got to do is move the plumbing hookups because I used to be a plumber. But I'm running all my electrical through Yamez just so I make sure I don't screw that up. And then when Yamez says I need to do this thing and I can't do it, I'm just being like, I'll just backwards or Southern engineer it. It'll be all right. We'll just twist up some baling wire together and stick it in there. It'll be fine. But then the very last, once I get the whole thing all set up, the very last thing I'm going to do is pull the meter and hook up the new wires to the main, and then pop the meter back in. And I might get to that next month. I might not. I don't know. But I'm pretty stoked about the tankless water heater because I am due for a new element. Since I've owned that house, I've had to put a new element and thermostat in it every February for the last 4 years, and so I'm right there at about the time where I need to put a new element and thermostat in it, and hopefully I can. It'll make it until I get this one hooked up. So I got that done. I had the laser hair removal. Then I sat around here all for the next Thursday, Friday. Somehow I lost a day. I literally thought yesterday was Sunday, and I'm out on a job, and I'm like, oh shit, I need to use 11. It's 8:57 in the morning, and I'm like, oh, I gotta get into Discord real quick and let Yamez know I'm gonna be too busy to be in the show. And I climb into Discord, and it's like I'm the only one in the chat, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? Like how did? What's going on? I mean, like, how is Yamez not in the Discord at 8:57? Ooh, and I was like, it is Sunday, right? And my cousin's like, no, it's Saturday. I'm like, it's not. No, yesterday was like the whole week. I thought I was one day further ahead than what I actually was. It was crazy, and so somehow the whole week I lost an entire day, and so I've ever since I got back here, I thought it was a day later than what it really was, and yeah. So yesterday was the only day this week I worked. I did luck out and pull in 19 hours, so that's just enough to pay my medical insurance for the paycheck, and so yay. I might do a little bit better than break even on a zero check. So, other than that,
sorry,
that's my week in a nutshell. And so now we can get on to Roy that just popped into the chat and say, "How was your week?"
I don't know where he went. There he is.
And like, bam, I'm out. Screw you guys.
All right, just setting some stuff up.
How you doing, Roy?
Oh, busy. Busy.
Iceman.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm about as busy as a frog leg in a frying pan right now. So.
Yep. I see you're also drinking coffee.
Awesome. No, on a health food kick right now. So juice.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So how was your week?
My week actually is pretty good. It's busy. I just did a private one-on-one blacksmithing class yesterday. We forged a French Baroque little hook together during that class, so that was pretty great. And the rest of the week was a blur. I'm getting prepared for my conference in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And so I've got a grill that I'll be taking down there. A really fancy, iron grill and a whole lot of storyboarding and things like that. So I've got a whole bunch of forge welding and complicated forge welds and stuff to do. And so I was doing all the prep work for it this week, plus we're on the CNC side of the business and everything else. And, that whole thing, lots of stuff. I kind of have to put things in little bins and just kind of dump them all out. Like, yeah, I'm just doing all of these things at once. So
Right.
Rising tide, that sort of thing. Yeah, but it was a pretty good week. Pretty good week. So very productive.
Right, right. Good deal, good deal. So, yeah, I actually a couple things. You know, we have two topics of the week this week. One, we want to touch on solid or non-solid fuels, which I did watch Roy's gas forge sizing video this morning to brush up on what gas forges actually are. No, I'm just kidding. You know, which was actually a great point for the topic today. And then we're also going to have a bit of fun after that topic and let Roy see some of the comments because I believe it's been Jess that's been going through and commenting on everybody's stuff, and Roy hasn't been. Now, I will say that there was a screw up. I was supposed to set this live up last Sunday, and I did not. And Roy was supposed to have this link and do this big promotional run for us, and that is my fault. 100% my fault.
Yeah.
So,
Yamas didn't know anything about it until like a half an hour ago, and I was like, "Hey, I bet you forgot to set the stream up last Sunday and give Roy the link." And he's like, "Wait, what are you even talking about?" And I was like, "You remember we were gonna go over comments on the ice video, and you were gonna set it up so that you know." And he's like, "No."
yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, I knew it. I knew it." But that's all
What I
right.
get. I always forget that I've got a responsibility to help the little guys.
Yeah, that's
It's hard to do that sometimes, isn't it?
I know, right? But yeah, so
sure.
gas fuel or gas and non-solid fuel forges. You know, we went over extensively the various solid fuel forges, and now you've got, you know, typically when you think of a gas forge, you think of propane. You know, get your old you know, grill tank out there and just hook it up to a forge burner and roll. But did you know that you could use diesel or cooking oil or you know, if you take like one of those knives and you pull all the oil from your face and you collect it, you can even use that.
I want to touch up on a couple things in that regard. So obviously, for most of us, when we're talking about a non-solid forge fuel, we're talking about propane. Because I mean, let's face it, it's cheap, it's easy to get. Well, cheap is relative, but it's easy to get, and you know you can find burners, you can find forges, you can find everything you need on eBay, on Amazon,
On ChristCenteredIronworks.com.
blacksmith supply. You can go to the nearest Farrier supply store and buy a brand spanking new gas forge. Granted, it's probably going to cost double what you could find it elsewhere at, but they're easy to find. It's easy to get parts for. I mean, for that matter, if you want to, you know, save a couple bucks, you could order the sometimes. I mean, sometimes it costs more to build it yourself, but you can order the different constituent parts and build and assemble the whole dang thing yourself. And so a propane forge is really an easy in, especially if you're a new smith getting started. It's easier to work with propane to start with because you're not just going to turn around and melt 3 horseshoes in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I do know somebody that's done that. I'm not going to say who, but um, you know, uh, that is here nor there. I mean, that could happen to anybody, I swear. But
I've never
propane
done it.
is probably going to be your number one non-solid forge fuel. Now there are other possibilities in that regard that you know, like Yamaz is saying, diesel, used oil, whatever. I worked in the shop that I worked out of in Wyoming. Had a used oil burner heater, and so like you know we had 30 or 40 trucks that you know running out of this shop, and all of the used engine oil out of those trucks went right into the oil heater to heat the shop, and very rarely did we run out. I mean, honestly, the guy that ran the shop, he'd be watching the oil level in the tank, and he'd be like, "Oh, we need to do some oil changes today," you know. But it's a the oil using the used motor oil or diesel or whatever is fairly easy to do. I had a heater in my shop up in Wyoming that was oil fired, and it was the injector on it was small enough that like motor oil wouldn't run through it very well. It wouldn't atomize. So you had to mix it 50-50 with diesel. So if you mixed it 50-50 with diesel, it would run right through and it would get hot. I mean, this sucker would glow red, just, and I mean, like literally, it's just you just put a little bit of drop a little bit of gasoline and oil down in the little drip tray, and you light it, and then once it stays lit, you could turn it on, and it would light the spray from the injector, and then just stay running as long as you were applying fuel to it. Now, by the same respect, that entire process applies exactly the same to a liquid fueled forge. If any of you have ever used a turbo heater or the little, I call them turbine heaters or whatever, it's got the fan in the back, the fuel injector. It's basically a jet engine without a turbine on it. You've got a fan with it, which is the compressor slash the intake. You've got the combustion chamber. And I mean, if you had a turbine on the backside that would spin the fan, you would basically be heating your shop with a jet engine. But it's not. It's just so it's a turbo heater, whatever. That whole setup is basically a liquid fueled forge. It's just the hot spot is inside the combustion chamber, and you can't get to it. So you could literally, and I have taken all of the parts of one of these things because our shop threw two of them away. Because they didn't, I don't know, they left them outside or whatever. Somebody dropped something on them with a forklift. Anyways, they threw two of them in the scrap metal bin, and my deal here at work is if it's in the bin, I can have it. And so I took them both home, and I used the parts from both of them to make one working heater, which I still use to heat my shop at home. And then the other one, I got the pump, the fan, and the injector and all that out of. And I was going to make a liquid fueled forge out of it. The only problem being that I had a hard time finding a refractory that was able to handle the BTUs. And so the back in the day, like 2018, on our first like in mass group, like YouTube gathering at Quad State, there was this guy, Gordon Family Forge.
Yes.
Not to be confused with another Gordon and Forge name. He had built an actual liquid fueled forge and had the same problem. It was just literally, it was melting the refractory and then melting the outside case. It was getting so hot. 2-inch 3,000 degree KO, and it was melting it inside the forge. And so, I mean, liquid fueled is possible, but I don't personally have the knowledge or the material available to make it efficient and practical. You know what I mean? Like if you're melting your forge, like even if it takes 10 runs to melt through your forge, that's still not worth it. You know what I mean? Uh, I mean, my propane forges, I threw the K-wool in there. Well, the first one I had to replace it after a year because I didn't know about flux and how it eats K-wool. But since then it's been relined. But the other one, no, I mean it's been holding steady for years, and with no intention of having to redo it, just running on propane and whatever. But liquid fueled, if you don't design it right, it's gonna melt some shit. And I so far don't know a way around that. Um, I've been unable to find any type of refractory substance that can get up there about 5,000, 6,000 degrees to be able to withstand the heat of oil. Diesel doesn't quite burn that hot, but if you're going to burn oil, it burns that hot. It can, if you've got the right air mixture to it, you can get 6,000 degrees out of burning oil, and Fahrenheit, mind you, not Celsius. So I've got all of the parts to build a liquid fueled forge. I've got everything there, and the only thing I don't have is a way to contain it without melting the containment. So that's where I'm at on that. I'd say most of us prefer the propane, especially starting out, because it's easy to deal with, and then you delve into the coal and figure out your control, keeping a clean fire, and all of the different um, um, what do you call it, nuances. Because I think when you're first starting out, coal is a bit intimidating as far as all the different stuff you got to do to get it just right. And I know for me starting out, I was very intimidated to start with coal. It's like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, so let's just light a fire and see what happens. And you know, so propane was always my go-to to begin with, and I think a lot of people go that way. I think Roy actually started in a coal forge, but so he got lucky in that respect. But eh, propane, it's easy to get, it's easy to find, and you know, it's uh, a good entry point into blacksmithing. It's like I said, you're not going to melt your stuff. You're every little, you're trying to do a leaf. You're not going to melt the tip off of it in propane. Generally speaking, in a commercial forge. So that's my spiel on liquid and gas, and I will move on and let somebody else have the floor, whether that's Yamez, Roy, whatever.
Yeah,
You want to go
I'll be
next,
honest.
Yamas?
Well, mine's quick. I honestly have only used propane forge occasionally. I'm primarily coal, and so all I can really do is speak to the differences of gas versus coal heating, the actual use case of it. Because I'm not a scientist, I'm a comedian. The I can heat up a whole bar of metal and work the whole thing, or if I've got a long kind of scroll or twist or something that I need to heat up a whole area for, it's a bit easier for a propane forge. Or if I'm doing a whole bunch of little things, just throw them all in the forge and grab one out at a time. That's where I like a propane forge. But for the nitty gritty, getting down and heating exactly where you want to the exact temperature that you want, I use coal. You know, but yeah, I've never used the liquid fuel forges like the gas, diesel, or oil or whatever. Maybe Roy has. Roy, do you have anything to add to the topic before we, you
Uh,
know?
yeah, so I'd come at it from a little bit different of an angle. So I started, I cut my teeth on blacksmithing with a coal forge, almost pretty much right out the gate. And so, and I even actually at the time actually heated my house with coal as well, and I had been doing so for I don't know, probably 6, 7 years already. So coming from that mindset, it wasn't a really big, it wasn't a large barrier to entry for me as far as getting straight into just using solid fuels. It's just like building a campfire, and like we've done like everyone's probably done who's ever built a campfire. You blow on it and the coals get hot, and I mean the next natural progression is you stick a coat hanger in it or you leave the fire poker in it a little longer and see if you can't get it red hot, stuff like that. So it was a fairly natural progression and easy thing for me. What I haven't used a waste oil forge, either a waste oil or a diesel forge or any of the other type of, liquid fueled forges. And predominantly the reason for that is there is a lot of cost with them involved for initial setup. There is a lot of health concerns. You have to have them properly vented in your space, because they are not like a gas forge. They do have a lot of byproducts that come off of them. I used to do heating and air conditioning, and I used to work on actual, fuel oil furnaces. So I used to work on those and doing combustion analysis and things like that. And they are some dirty birdies. those just the
Yeah.
furnaces alone. And we were always trying to shoot to get somewhere 70% efficient, right? We were always trying to shoot for 70% efficient. And every oil forge I've ever seen that anyone's made is probably running at about 10% efficiency of that. I mean, it's nasty, the amount of carbon they put out and the amount of carbon monoxide and stuff. So they are a dirty, dirty forge. There's more to forging than just the max amount of heat output that is capable of a particular burner. Because us as blacksmiths, we don't really need that, right? Like, so say if you were forging copper, you need to turn your burners way back, right? Because you don't need 9,000 degrees. You don't need the face of the sun temperature or whatever, right? Like you don't need crazy hot to forge on copper, right? You just need to heat it up to its place and where, it can be pliable or, you can anneal it. Same thing with steel. Steel doesn't need, as I believe Alexa said, was, what did you say? It burns at 5,000, 6,000 degrees,
The oil?
the oil. Yeah,
Yeah,
the oil.
it
Yeah.
can
So,
at peak efficiency. Yes.
yeah. So steel has no business being that hot. Steel's a vapor at that point, So it's not it's not needed. Nothing's ever needed to get it up to that high. So where I've seen them being used, liquid fuel anyhow, being used the most effectively in smelters. So someone who wants to smelt down or melt down a lot of cast iron or steel, they're really great in that kind of department, for putting that amount of energy out in there. And then of course those smelters are lined with graphite and ceramic and some other things that can actually take the heat, but aren't so um, they're not ductile enough to make a good forge. They're not a good serviceable
And
situation.
they're not very reflective of heat.
Yeah, they're not reflective of heat. They're just containing the heat that's in there, kind of type deal, for the time being, and they're not very efficient either. Um, so for me, it's about use. It's all about use case. So the most versatile forge you can get is a solid fuel forge. That's not always possible for anybody. But as I said in that one video that I did on gas forge, what size gas forge is right for you, it's all about sizing the forge to the work that you want to do, right? That the body of work that you want to do. If you're going to do mainly little small batch production run stuff, you need to get as small of a heating chamber that will do that for you, for efficiency's sake. So this way, it's not eating you out of house and home. If you're doing large work where you need to fit like whole billets of chunks of steel because you're doing hammers or something like that, maybe you're forging sledgehammers and that's your thing. Well, then you need a very large volume, of a heating chamber and a burner to match. And that's where a liquid fueled, if you were forging sledgehammers, maybe a liquid fueled forge might be a bit more efficient. I'll put asterisks there. It'll be more efficient at getting your steel hot quicker if you're running under a power hammer or something like that. But as far as fuel efficiency, they're terrible. They are terrible.
Well, and as far as the efficiency goes, no, that is a fair point that I didn't even bring up. But yeah, I mean, like even a diesel engine and a pickup only runs 40% efficiency. I mean, like that's why they have the whole DEF system and the reburner and all that, is because all of that soot or whatever that is all unburned fuel. It's all unburned carbon. It's 60% of diesel fuel runs through the engine unused, and now they're with propane injection on a diesel, you can get as high as 80% efficiency on a propane on a diesel engine. But then again, I mean, that's not as simple as just. I mean, it's kind of like nitrous on a gasoline vehicle. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to blow the heads off of it, and so propane injection is a bit of a hairy subject, but it does increase your efficiency by double on a diesel engine. And that 40% efficiency on a normally well, it's not normally aspirated because they're typically turbocharged, but that 40% efficiency on a diesel is actually like about as good as we can get without additives. You know what I mean? I mean, look at the state of technology today, and you go down and you buy a brand new Duramax or a brand new Power Stroke or a brand new Kitty Cat, and you're only burning, you're only utilizing 40% of the carbon in your fuel. And by the same account, and I can totally see how in a forge that number is even smaller because it's not an issue where there's a computer that's directly
Controlling it.
monitoring your oxygen intake versus your fuel output, and then regulating them to that exact optimum mixture. It's just like throw some air in it, light the fire, and hope for the best, and so you're not going to get that efficiency. And even in waste oil, I mean, okay, it doesn't, a lot of times it doesn't cost you anything, but then you're sitting there, you're sitting there with a smokestack out of your shop that looks like you're rolling coal on a 24 valve Cummins for 6 hours in your shop, and got it vented out the top, just whoa, as they pour in the coal to it.
That's
But
my kind
All right,
of.
that's kind of some coolness factor. That's a
That's
coolness factor. I actually have a flap on top, like a muffler. Brop, brop. That would be sick.
and how cool would
Yeah.
it be if you had like a throttle on your forge? You go over there and you stick your billet, your hammer billet in there, and then you just got this hand throttle. You just pull back, whoa, smoke starts billowing out of the room.
Okay.
Honestly,
All right.
that would
Shooting
be
flames.
cool.
Impractical Blacksmiths. This needs to be made. A V12 forge,
Oh,
diesel
no,
forge.
I don't know about all that, but
The forge can run the power hammer at the same time.
literally, I did design a liquid fueled forge that ran on a large big truck turbocharger, and for like air compression and this, that, and the other, and it just wound up being so cost ineffective, just to build it. Not even counting refractory, just the building it part was. I was looking at like $1,500 in the tubing and the oiling system, because if you're gonna put a turbo on it, you gotta oil the turbo, or you're gonna get 5 minutes out of your setup, And so you gotta have an oil pump, you gotta have an oil pressure regulator, you gotta have an oil reserve tank. I mean, there's all of this stuff that goes into building something that freaking cool. That it's like I don't have the disposable income to. Well, I mean, I could have, but I don't have the disposable income to do something that badass. Maybe someday,
Right.
but until then, it is beyond my financial flexibility to build that forge that I designed a couple of years ago. That is basically a turbocharged diesel forge. And the point of it is like I was going to mount it to the side of my truck, my big truck at work, so that when I go out there on location and I've got like, oh, it's going to be a few hours, and I wind up sitting there for 12 hours, like not doing anything, I could just like fire up this forge that's piped into the fuel tank on my truck, you know, free diesel, and then just slide this anvil out, on a slider rail, and go to town, just making stuff out on the side of location. I can't be on location because open flame. I'd have to have a hot work permit and all that. But if I'm not on location, just out on the road, yeah, hey, it'd be fun.
That actually sounds like a cool idea.
Yeah.
If you're stoked to see that, yeah, that'd be neat.
I might have to share that ice anvil video. I'm sorry, I was just messaging some people like, yeah, we've got Roy on, and he recently did a video where he made an anvil made of ice, and they're like, what? Like, yeah, y'all gotta get into this.
And I'm just saying, how cool would it be to have a forge with a turbo whistle? That
Right.
hear it spin up,
Right.
Arr, arr, arr.
George Anderson, welcome to Bubba. Thank you very much.
Oh, right on.
Right on.
Thanks for the membership there, George. Right, so that pretty much concludes our segment on non-solid fuel forges, or non-solid forged fuel. I don't think we're really telling you guys anything you don't know. Uh, it is what it is. It's out there. What time do we have? Oh yeah, we're right there. So Roy, how did the last week's deal turn out?
Well, interesting as you might expect. Video didn't reach as far as I thought it might.
I say
Which,
yet.
I mean, it's YouTube, right? So it will probably get recirculated come next year. When everything's in the media, like, oh, ice and storm and snow and snowmageddon, right? And things like that next year. So when it'll recycle next year. I still got a few more videos in the tank around the ice anvil as well. So it's going to be kind of like a connected series. So I think overall for the channel, the video itself is going to do pretty well. But the subject matter itself is actually pretty hilarious to go around the internet and see. Oh my goodness, how diehard some folks are, and get tripped up on uh, technicalities and things like that. Like people will literally watch the video and say, I reject that reality. I'm just doing this over here now. Like, they like literally just like, I will not accept that as a my eyes didn't see what I saw. No,
Adam,
didn't
Adam
happen.
Savage, reject your
So
reality and substitute my own.
Right.
yep. Yeah, exactly.
I'm trying to pull up the
So
I'm trying to pull up the video so that I can have like a small little spot for it to read the comments.
that's good. That's good. Yeah, I
Uh,
can't see anything from my end as far as
no,
the
I know.
commentary. I'm using the phone, as I'm doing so I can't read through the comments. But yeah, just all over social media, wherever it was posted, it's just interesting the debate that it started. Um, the most interesting thing is for the ones that are like the real hardcore detractors, they didn't even actually watch the video, or B, right, they just have a thing against me in general, and YouTube blacksmiths. They're like, oh, that they just don't like me in general. So therefore, it's like my vote don't count. But the funny thing about that is none of those folks are actually putting their money where their mouth is and showcasing their own, right, thoughts or theories. They just reject it, just like, nope, doesn't happen.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's kind of like, for me, that's a more of an infuriating thing. Like, if we're going to have a discussion, if you're going to say I'm wrong, go ahead and show the results of where I'm wrong, because I've already done video proof about the preheating myth. One of them was about like, oh, well, what about the brittleness of steel? Oh, we were preheating, so this way, you don't end up losing an anvil edge, or snap the the nose off the horn or something like that. And yeah, all sorts of temperatures have been suggested for that, by the way, of like when steel gets brittle enough to where there's an issue with that. And
So I wanted to point out something that, like, I've heard that too. It's like, oh well, it's because steel gets brittle when it's colder. You can't get steel that cold, because like what I do, and I work in the oil field. I move rigs. I've got steel cable wrapped on a winch. It's inch and a quarter in diameter, and I pick up shit that's 300,000 pounds and walk around with it. And they do that in Alaska, where it's 60 or 80 below. And that winch line is on the outside of the truck, and the temperature of that winch line is 60 or 80 below zero, and it's still taking that. Well, I mean, okay, so the strain on the load, or on the line, is probably close to 80. Max probably is 96,000 pounds load on the cable, without just like breaking cleanly in half. Now they say this in safety meetings and stuff, like, oh, you got to watch out because when it gets colder, the line gets brittle and it could snap at any moment. No, it doesn't. It's just as flexible at 60 below as it is at 120 degrees outside. I mean, it literally, I've been doing this for 25 years, and all over the world, and it reacts the same regardless of what the temperature is. If it's going to break, it's because you had too many broken strands and you weren't maintaining your ship properly, or or you shock loaded it. It doesn't break because it was cold. And so I feel personally like that translates to any form of steel. I mean, like, my winch line is probably in the neighborhood of 1080 ish. I believe that's as close as I could come to estimating its carbon content, 1040 to 1080, somewhere in that area, and it holds up just fine at 40 below. Technically speaking, the coldest I've used it is 48 below, and the hottest is, I mean, like, who knows, 125, 130, but it's the same. If you do, it doesn't break because it's cold, because that's not cold enough to make a difference. And so that would,
So to piggyback on that, just out of the box thinking, and this is kind of where common sense used to be common. It's no longer common sense anymore. It's just called sense because it's not common anymore. But what about all the suspension bridges? What about all the steel railroad trestles
Yeah.
that are subjected to cold temperatures and
Yeah.
hundreds of tons going
Yeah.
across them? They don't shut down New York whenever they have a cold snap. I mean, idiots shut down New York whenever there's a cold snap, because people plugging up stuff. But like, they don't like just shut down bridges because it's cold, right? They don't do that. None of any of your concrete bridges, your little beltways and stuff you go and drive across, those have steel in them. They don't shut those down. It's nonsense, is what it is. It's complete and utter nonsense. It's someone who's taken a fact about steel. Does steel get brittle when it gets cold? At a certain temperature, yes, everything becomes brittle when it gets to a certain point, cold, or just like everything becomes malleable if it gets to a certain temperature, right? So there's the opposite ends of the spectrum. But somebody's taken something in a tech book somewhere, right? A technical manual about material properties, and then they have expounded upon that to mean like, oh, well, if I reach that temperature, everything's going to shatter and break like glass, or everything's going to snap, or this or that. And they leave out everything like mass, right? They leave out things like mass. They leave things out like hardness already, right? They leave out things like you're hitting hot steel that's cushioning the certain amount of kinetic energy, right? They leave a lot of things out of their equation. They just go back to like, oh, well, it said over, Google told me that steel gets brittle at whatever, temperature. And so therefore they just kind of regurgitate that information as well. I mean, clearly everybody knows that as fact. I did that whole class yesterday. It was 22 degrees in the shop, and we didn't preheat Olga. I've never preheated my anvils. I don't. I just don't. There's no way you're going to heat 450 pounds of steel to any meaningful difference ever.
I'd done it before I realized you didn't have to.
So here's some perspective. Okay, so like the range of temperature that we're working on an anvil in, at best, is 200 degrees. Like the range of temperature, like the hottest your anvil's gonna get, ambient temp. I'm talking about ambient temperature. I mean, obviously you can get a torch and you can heat your anvil up, but ambient temperature, the max range you're gonna get anywhere on Earth is 200 degrees. That's going to be like 100 below to 100 above. You know what I mean? That's only a 200-degree range. Now, to us as a human, there's a big difference between 100 below and 100 above. That is really, both ends of that are life-threatening to a human. But to a piece of steel, 200 degrees, I'm sorry, it ain't shit. I mean, like, when you're forging and it comes out at 1800 degrees, are the properties wildly different at 1600 degrees as it's cooled down 200 degrees in your forging process? No. And that 200-degree increment going down, yes, the steel moves less, but there's not this critical shift in molecular makeup of the steel in any one of those 200-degree windows. You know what I mean? So literally, that is such a minute amount of the temperature range of steel that it's fairly pointless to even worry about. I don't even understand how it's a thing. Like I don't know, where did it come from? Why is that? I mean, it makes no sense to me from a scientific standpoint of how this argument even exists in the first place.
Welcome to the 2020s. No, I'm just kidding. Where
Well,
people will
one
argue
of the
about everything.
one of the common things is like, well, it couldn't hurt or it couldn't do this. You got blokes out there taking and preheating their anvils in Georgia. Like, what are you even doing with yourself, man? It's like 45 degrees and you're preheating your anvil. Like, what a maroon. I'm just sorry. I gotta put it out there. Like, if you're preheating your anvil and you're in Georgia, it got like 45 degrees. You really need to assess what you're doing with yourself in life. It's just you're so much time. The Forge and the Arctic Circle, man, and they just don't. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. Your anvil will never be. And I'm up pretty far north, and I can tell you that Olga is never warm, never warm in dead summer. In dead summer, like our peak temp up here is like 80 degrees for like 4 days in
That's
peak
cold.
temperatures here where I'm at. And for the most part, it's like 70. We got like 60s, high 70s. That's it. Olga during that point sweats like crazy. She just sweats. She's cold the whole time. I'm literally forging in a puddle for most of the summer because it's just radiating. It's condensating on the anvil. So that it's complete nonsense basically. And so when you show a visual proof and evidence, that's one of the largest ones that most people come up with. It's like, oh well, I mean, I can clearly see when I'm forging, I can clearly see, I can feel the difference. You're not feeling nothing. You're not feeling nothing. Hot take, that's all a bunch of horse pucky. You don't feel a dang thing. It's like if they're telling somebody who spent 16 years of their life at an anvil that they clearly feel a difference. It's like I have like hammered every day of my life for the last 16 years at an anvil.
But
So
these
I,
people that have been preheating their
educate me.
animals their whole life and swear by it, they're so invested they can't admit that they're wrong. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's like it's kind of like having an argument with your wife. I mean, like when you realize you're wrong, you don't go, "Ah, shit, I fucked up. No, I'm wrong. My bad." No, you stick to your guns, and then you're just like,
Double down,
"You know
baby.
what? I'm taking my
speaking
argument and I'm going to the garage," and then you're like, "Shit."
speaking of
Uh,
arguments and people's opinions on this, I say we take some time and peruse the comments. Okay.
that's what I was going to
Yeah,
suggest.
that'd be
Comments,
good.
read us some comments.
All right. Yeah, I've got it up on the screen for those who don't know, over in the corner to read the comments. And I don't know if the chat can actually see it or not, but let me see. First one
Not
is
really.
Roy just trying to stoke the fire. He goes, hello, everyone. If you want to come over and continue this hot debate, I'll be live here for a little while this morning doing just that. Oh, that was for this show. Haha. And then he links us. Yeah. First comment, at least to me, is from me. It says, after watching this video a few times and comparing it to other videos of his, you can clearly see this is AI. Look at the fingers, and if you watch the wood in the background, it doesn't match the wood grain in his other videos. Totally fake. And somebody goes, yeah, it's supposed to be the middle of winter in Michigan, and you can clearly see green grass through the split in the wood siding. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me see. Austin Michael says, I will comfort this is ice. I am with the company that carved. Oh, I can confirm this is ice. I'm with the company that carved the anvil. Congratulations on the 2000th video. Have been watching nonstop. Yeah, it is a fantastic
Yeah.
job with that. Yeah, I'm trying to find people to argue it. And usually you see that in the comments to comments. But Hey Den LaBelle says, proofs in the pudding. I'll never forget this one. I was even told in my Abana class that preheating the anvil helps with forge welds. This is a cool one, Roy. Ha 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 ha. Spoonie the Badger
Vanny.
says, yeah, Abana recommends preheating your anvil.
Yeah, I'm making enemies. I'm making
Yeah,
enemies everywhere I go.
this is
Take them
absolute
down,
pure
Roy. Take 'em
gold.
down.
One definitive
Yeah.
experiment is worth more than 1,000 expert opinions. Absolutely. Practical proof. Or impractical proof, as the case may be. Eager to see the sledge test of the hammer. We all are. Oh boy, this is going to make some old timers mad. Let me see. End of controversy. Thanks for taking the time and spending the money to lay this myth to rest. Should get a
Very
picture
sad,
of a
but,
weed. Should get a picture of a weed burner, or with a weed burner standing next to a puddle of water. Just got done preheating it.
So yesterday, hold on, Yamas. Yesterday,
Yeah.
when I checked this video to see how many views it had, and I was like, 2,800, really? That's it? How did? But I do understand. Like, you don't know when it's going to hit that ching, and then just like take off. It's not necessarily going to be right when you release it. But the video at the top of the comments said, I saw the title, and immediately I was like, duh, the Leidenfrost effect. He's like, and then I started to watch the video, and I saw the steel plate on top of the ammo. And I was like, oh shit, I didn't think of that. And I don't. The comment was similar to that or whatever.
Yeah,
but,
I got
like,
it right here.
The guy said, okay, you got it.
Yeah. He says, I saw the title and went into annoying commenter know-it-all mode and went, duh, because of the Lindenfrost effect, there was an insulating layer of steam. What? The metal isn't even touching the ice. The plate of metal you placed on its top shut me up. I'm going to be over here in my dunce cap. Good day.
Yeah. So like a lot of the comments across like social media are very similar to that. Like people try to play this like big brain kind of play. Like, well, actually, and then like, that well, actually that some people lead with, again, they're trying to just go super. They can't accept it on its face, on its face value that like, hey, this is something I've done, right? They're like, oh well, one of the problems was I didn't actually forge weld on ice.
Yeah.
I guess, my argument to that is, well, do we actually forge weld on anvils? Or are we just forge welding on the surface plane of an anvil? Like, you know what I mean? You could always just like, oh, let me just take that. Let's be more factual, Actually, you're forge welding on a slight air cushion because there's air between the anvil. You're never at, and the anvil just holds the oxygen layer there, and then you smith on top of that, right? Like, you could always just like go, well, actually, as far as you like to go with that, it's like a round robin type discussion, but that was one of the most common ones. Was like, oh, you didn't actually forge weld on the ice, and it's like,
Yeah. I got
thanks.
this one. I'd like to see you heat up 3 bars of steel that are 1 inch by 1/4 inch, and set them down on one on top of the ice anvil, one on top of a room temp anvil, and the last one on an anvil that's 150-ish or more degrees, like it would be if you've been forging for the last 2 or 3 hours, and see which bar loses its heat the fastest. I forge outside, and I know that in the winter, the amount of time I get out of a single heat is much shorter than a heat in the summertime. I'd like to comment to that. When you've got every single factor cooling your steel, the outside temperature, the air, the heat escaping faster through the heat, or through the cold air, the anvil is not the main contributing factor.
It's the density of the air.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the firmament.
Actually, it's very much the atmosphere, right? So if you're pulling out, if you're whipping that thing, if you're in a gale, right, and it's raining outside, well, of course, the rain's going to have more to do with your steel cooling off than. Fun fact: I've actually forged in a torrential downpour before, like at an event where I was demonstrating, where there's water puddles on my anvil, and I was still forging. So again, it's complete nonsense preheating your anvil, but I'll take that bet, right? Olga right now is exactly 18 degrees because that's how cold it is here. So that's room temperature. That's colder than the ice. That's colder than the ice anvil would have been. So Olga would have done, and even if I heated Olga up to 100 degrees, 200 degrees, ooh, let's get spicy. Take her up to 350 degrees. We'll put her over the fire and just really just heat her from the bottom up, get a good soaking heat in there. There will be zero difference because the air outside is 18 degrees, right? Like so that is going to have the main contributing factor in
Right.
all three of those cases. But what I can say to that commenter is you are welcome to do so and post your results.
Yes.
You're welcome to spend your money and your time and your video equipment and post your results. Refute
Right.
it away.
And
So it
I'll
goes,
say, when you say, oh, my stuff loses heat more in the summer versus the winter sitting on an anvil, I do, I mean, because your anvil is only touching one surface of your hot metal, right? The other three
Mhm.
surfaces are exposed to the air. Um, Now, the density of the air surrounding that piece of hot metal is very okay. So say you go outside in Texas when it's 40 degrees. You walk outside and you're like, holy shit, it's freaking cold out here. I need a jacket. But in Wyoming, you go outside at 40 degrees and you're like, oh, I'm starting to sweat. This is t-shirt weather. And it doesn't have anything to do with the temperature. It has to do with the density of the air and the amount of air molecules that are coming into contact with your skin and pulling the heat from your body. Okay, and so the higher the altitude you are, the fewer molecules are removing your heat. As you move inland, whatever. But by the same account, hot air versus cold air. Cold air is more dense and removes heat faster than hot air does, and that's why you would have the appearance of. And honestly, it's practically a negligible amount of time. I mean, if you're talking about the difference between 0 degrees Celsius and 50 degrees Celsius forging temperature, you're talking about a usable forging time difference of about 2 seconds. I mean,
yeah,
that's literally in a third, because a heat is typically 30 seconds to a minute, depending on if you're going to do any planishing on the backside. So 30 seconds to a minute, and 2 seconds. It doesn't even matter if you're not planishing. Even in the 30 seconds, I got to strike while it's at this temperature. 2 seconds isn't going to make any difference at all. I mean, it's so not worth worrying about. The amount of energy and time expended into heating up the anvil, is honestly just an excuse to stand there and stay warm and drink coffee while you're waiting.
that's the
I
crux.
get so let me give everyone out there that's actually listening a test you could do on your own that's super cheap. It's super cheap. If you want to rebuttal me, you want to refute the thing on preheating anvils and the myth around that. Okay. Instead of sticking your foot in your mouth later on when you got more experience, do this very simple test. Take a 1 inch by 1 inch square bar by about 3 inches long. It's got to be 3 inches long, not a 1 inch cube, but make it 3 inches long. A 3 inch long 1 by 1 square. Heat it up to forging temperature and set it endways. So set the 1 inch square end on your anvil like that. Okay. And what you will observe that will happen is that bottom surface will start chilling and it'll start turning black. And the reason for that is that steel has a property in it, just like all materials. There's only so much conduction that material can do. There's only so much heat transfer a given material can do. And that's by time and surface area. There's only so much heat that can transfer in a specific amount of time. And so what you'll see is you'll see a cool little line develop across the bottom of that steel. And then you know what you're not going to see? You're not going to see it continue to grow from the bottom up like the anvil is drinking from a straw. That's not what you're going to see. You're going to see that same cool, chilled little line stay there, and it'll be about the same amount of thickness. And you're going to start seeing first at the edges. I know this for a fact. I've done this.
Hmm.
Anyone
The
can do this in your
corners.
own shop. The corners, which are sharp, thin areas, right? In the air, the atmosphere of your shop, doesn't matter if it's 80 degrees outside, 100 degrees, the steel's going to cool down, right? Or if it's negative 100, the steel's going to cool down. You're going to see the corners start chilling off first, and they're going to start creeping to the center. And you're still going to see like a little oval of heat right in the center of that bar stock. So anywhere that there's a sharp edge, it'll start chilling at the sharp edge first. And it'll slowly propagate inwards until the whole piece turns dark and black and imperceivable to the eye. But that same chilled little section, that same little line, doesn't propagate any more heat. So if the theory that the anvil, right, is sucking all the heat very quickly out of your steel, then it should propagate all of that heat completely out of the piece, dumping it into the anvil. You should see a clear line develop where it's just getting darker and darker from the bottom, and you won't, because that's not how thermal dynamics work. So it's not how material science is. So go ahead.
And why that is because that small layer that turns black when you set it on that cold anvil, it doesn't.
There you go.
It doesn't. It becomes an insulating layer, and it insulates the rest of the bar from that continued heat transfer. And it's much
Somebody
like
give me a mic to drop.
yeah right.
Boom.
Boom. No, I mean like that's what it is. It's the same. It's the same thing. Like I've done that with a piece of titanium. I've set a piece of hot metal on titanium to watch to see how it differs, and because titanium does not heat transfer. I mean, like you can have it like the Dan Moss made those titanium tongs, and like literally 2 inches back from the nibs after a full forging session, and it's still room temperature because heat does not transfer through titanium very well. I've done that with a piece of titanium sheet to see, and yeah, there's this very thin line, and then it just stays right there because there becomes this temperature transfer barrier with the cold steel, and it's much like dropping a piece of steel into nitric acid. Like if I drop a piece of copper into nitric acid, it dissolves it in like it depends on the size, but very very quickly, and producing all this brown smoke that's nitric oxide. And then boom. But if you drop a piece of steel in nitric acid, because nitric acid is like one of the strongest acids we know of, you drop a piece of steel in there, nothing happens. Why? Because immediately the outside layer of the steel becomes oxidized, and you can't even see it because it's only a molecule layer thick, and it insulates the rest of the steel from being touched by the acid. And so, like nitric acid is fairly useless against steel because it reacts so quickly. It just like puts this thing, and it insulates it from the acid. And that's the same thing that happens when you put a piece of hot steel on a cold surface, is you get that immediate small spot where it got cold, and that cold layer insulates the rest of the heat from just continuing to travel down through it. So
I have a theory.
Yeah.
if that makes
I have
sense.
a theory real quick on why this myth gets propagated more now so than what it's done in the past. Again, old timers, used to like to warm their buns up on a warm anvil versus versus a cold steel anvil. Okay, fine, fair enough, right? But again, they also believe quenching something true north helped, and they also believe in a lot of other things, like sacrificing, virgins and whatnots and things like that. So again, today,
Hey, you leave me alone.
yeah, we have a bit more information. You're safe, Yamez. I think you're safe.
Yeah.
So we have a bit more information to go off of. Well, what happens is the people that are arguing it the most likely, there's probably a key factor, is they have probably all witnessed a thin piece of steel, like knife makers, knife makers on a blade, right? And you lay a thin edge of a blade that you're working on, and you lay it on your cold steel anvil, right? And it turns dark. You're like, well, the anvil's robbing the heat. It does that in 100 degrees. You could be out smithing in 109 degrees in Texas, and if you're beating out a thin little blade, it's going to do that too. That anvil could sit out in the sun all day long, and I guarantee you, as soon as you touch it to it, because it's transferring the heat in which the material can transfer the heat until it reaches that point, right? That saturation point, that insulation point, like what Alexis was talking about. And so I think that's where that gets propagated a lot. Is you'll see like, oh well, it transfers a lot because it's thin material. You can clearly see it turn black when you set it on your anvil. And you should do that too. Take a really thin piece of sheet metal, sheet material, and lay it on your anvil, and you watch it go black fairly quickly, right? Because it doesn't have, how do I want to say it? It has a lot of surface area to conduct the heat away, but it doesn't have a lot of mass, right? It doesn't have a lot of held mass in that sheet. And so if you watch that, you'll see that it'll suck that heat fairly quickly, right? Until it reaches that point. But you can never see that it reaches that point because it's whatever. It's as thin as it could be there. So
Yeah.
And I wonder if when you're talking about that, as far as like doing the knife on the edge, and it got me to thinking, what if you had a plate? Like, so, I don't know, back in the day, I took my Harbor Freight anvil, and then I took a piece of 4140 plate, and preheated it, welded it to the Harbor Freight anvil, whatever, and then preheated it, quenched it so it's hardened, whatever. So I had or no, wait, I think I hardened it before I welded it to it. Anyways, doesn't matter. So anyways, what my thought was, in a similar fashion, what if you took like a piece of plate that was, say, like, faced whatever, it had a hardy hole in it, so you could just like drop any hardy tool through it to secure it in the hardy hole so it doesn't twist, move around, whatever. What if you were to take a piece of metal and preheat it in the forge, and obviously a orange or red heat would be pointless because it would deform. But if you let it cool to a black heat, and obviously I guess this could just be mild steel because it doesn't matter, and then you just set it on the anvil and drop the tool through the hardy so that this piece of steel is um, stuck there. It's not going to move around, and then you forged on it. Would it pull the heat because it's cooled to a black heat, but now you're still talking it's 800 degrees or somewhere in there, and you're trying to forge it? Would it still pull the heat as fast? Now, obviously, this is too hot for a regular anvil because it's going to screw up the temper, because the
mhm.
tempering temperature is like 400 degrees, 350 degrees. That's where you start messing with temper, so you wouldn't want to get an anvil that warm. But well, then again, if you put a piece of metal that size on there for, I don't know, you know what I mean? My brain was just working, wait a minute, what if you let this plate cool to black heat, 800 degrees, set it on the anvil and forge on it? Would it, and it has nothing to do with like, would it dent or would it be effective, but would it pull the heat the same way? You know what I mean? Out of a 1600-degree piece of metal. Just something I'm wondering. I don't know.
So like for me, I mean, I think I can answer that. The closer you narrow that delta T window, right? The narrower you make that band. Like obviously, if you take something that's 1800 degrees and you put it on something that's 1800 degrees, right? There's not going to be any change, right? There won't be at least a temperature change. So if you had a plate that's say 1,000 degrees, something that's heated up, say it's a big chunk of forklift truck pine, and it's 1,000 degrees, and you have it set on, and it's being held up by your anvil, and then you smith on that fork truck tine that's at 1,000 degrees, you'll see a appreciable difference, right? There should be some appreciable difference. Now, again, that only depends on how hot you're heating your material, right? So if you're just heating your material to say 1,600 degrees, now it's a 600-degree difference, right? 1,000 to 1,600, 600-degree difference. But as soon as you start moving up into 2,000, 2,100, 2,200, you're starting to get back to that. It's not going to make a meaningful difference. I mean, if you start getting up into, especially up into the forge welding temperatures, right?
Right.
Like that, like it's the same difference as far as it wouldn't matter if it was 100 degrees or if it was negative 100 degrees. It's the same. It's off the scale on the spectrum to where they can't even those two bodies can't even act or react fast enough with each other. That interchange. So one thing I'd like to point out there's people who will take fork truck tines, big blocks of steel, and they claim literally in the online forums and groups, they'll heat these things up to scalding hot, and then they'll set them on their anvil surfaces to get their anvil all heated up. It only takes 350 to about 400 degrees. It depends on the material to start affecting the temper of your anvil. So way to soften your anvil surface.
That's exactly it. If
You start getting it up to 600-700.
If the temperature of your anvil exceeds 350 degrees, you're now affecting the temper. And if you get it at 600, you're removing the temper altogether.
Yep. So way to soften that anvil surface that you were so worried about rebound with.
You might as well you might as well be forging on mild steel.
Yep.
Maybe not.
Give you a good example of that. Thomas and I, we forged out a section of it was like a dozer bucket. It was like a section of dozer bucket arm, and it had gotten twisted when I was showing off my treadle hammer. My air assist treadle hammer kit, like can it forge it? And I did that on I had a little Achio anvil. And I did a hardness test on it originally, right? And it tested out right around like 52 Rockwell on the hardness scale of that little Achio double horn anvil. Well, I was using that as my base as I was hammering that out. And that thing got well above, like, I mean, you throw water at it, it would just instantly turn to vapor, right? So it got screaming hot. That anvil is actually softer now. It's softer. So that means that big chunk of steel we put on there, yeah, that anvil was so hot you couldn't touch it. Would smoke your glove if you touched it, right? Because we were working this big, massive chunk that weighed almost as much as the anvil, right, to heat up this anvil. And so we ended up softening that anvil. So that anvil's soft. It'll take a dent now, like like you wouldn't believe. It probably needs to be reheat treated. I'm not going to do that. It's a throwaway anvil. It's a cheap anvil, so I'm not going to I'm not going to go through the efforts of it. But again, you're out there with a historical anvil that you're talking has a hardened faceplate that's maybe a 1/4 inch thick, and then you're going to set a 2-inch thick, 1.125 thick forklift truck tine that's 2,000 degrees, that you heat it up to 2,000 degrees, and you're going to let it sit on there, and then you expect that old anvil, right, to be as hard as the day is long there. Nope. Way to wreck it. Way to wreck that old anvil, all in the efforts of preheating some nonsense. So that's why it's important. I guess that's why I say that this preheat myth is important, because I mean, who's going to heat treat an anvil? An old Peter Wright. Who's got the abilities and the capabilities to take a preheat? An old Peter Wright, or for the love of God, an old colonial anvil that you may luck into that's over 200 years old, right? Like, who's got the facilities to reheat treat that when it just had a skiff of high carbon material on the surface? They basically lucked into that high carbon material at that point. Who's gonna do that? So yeah, so that's why it's a big thing for beginners to just knock that stuff off. Don't be preheating your anvil. Don't be putting a weed burner to the side of it. Don't be bringing it up to 800 degrees. You're ruining anvils out there.
So George Anderson has asked several times, okay, but what about preheating your oil? Is that necessary? Is that helpful? Well, honestly,
that's a little different.
Yeah, that is completely different from the topic at hand. But I will say, if you're not quenching in water, you're not doing it right. I mean, like,
I add salt to my water.
No, I mean, like, I have an oil quench tank, but like the metals that I usually use are I just quench them in water, and I mean, like, I use spring steel 5160 ish. I say ish because it is, and 4140 and 1080 and 1040 and 1040. That's like the high carbon steels that I use, and every bit of that is quenched in water, and then tempered in my oven in the kitchen at 400 degrees. So like, if I'm gonna quench something in water, or I mean oil, no, I don't. I'm not preheating it. I mean, like, because what preheating oil does is increases the viscosity and makes it
Decreases.
more oil. No, it increases
the
viscosity and makes more oil come into contact with the surface of the metal at a given time while you're shaking it around, and it lessens the Leidenfrost effect. So it makes for a quicker quench than if you did it in cold oil. And I mean, and if you're that worried about speeding up the quench it in water. I mean, obviously, there are metals that you can't do that with, but
I only quench my blades in warm yak's milk. That's
Yeah.
it. Like, if you want the best, straightest, truest blade ever, warm yak's milk.
Yes, he's not wrong.
That was an
But
odd pause of quiet. I
yeah,
couldn't hold
now
it. I couldn't hold it.
if I may
Uh,
on the quenchant versus the forging, for preheating
Go for it.
and yada yada yada. With forging, you're consistently forging for hours on end. Quenching, the goal is to get the matrix of like the matrices of the steel molecules, you know, crunched or like shifted within seconds. So whereas forging, you're dealing with minutes at a time working with the steel. Quenching, you're dealing with seconds. And certain steels, it's like they have to reach certain temperature points, certain alloys at certain temperature points within X amount of seconds for it to hit the different states of the crystal lattice. So like you're dealing with a lot tighter variables with your quenchant than you are with the surface of an anvil. So that's why it's not the same. It's not the same conversation, because you're literally dealing with seconds versus minutes.
There's two other things I'd like to point out about heat treat and quenching. So the blacksmithing world right now is a bit polluted by blade makers. And now stick with me. Don't take super offense, blade makers. But every conversation about heat treat that usually comes up is around blade making. Blade makers, blade making, blade makes, whatever. And you are all quenching something super thin with lots of surface area. So a lot of the advice that is given is around, and a lot of the the advice and a lot of the forums and a lot of the stuff is written up around quenching an edge tool of some kind, right? It's a quench for things. The, so what we don't take into effect, right? So everybody will say, oh, you got to quench that in oil. Most steels have multiple quenchants that can be selected for that given steel
Mm-hmm.
to bring out certain properties to get it to a certain hardness or not, right? On the HRC or the Brunel scale. And those quenchants are chosen based upon the thickness of the material, right? And what its finished given properties are to be, right? Because there are some dyes that need to be very surface wearing, but they don't need them to be tough, right? And so you may quench a particular steel in water for, let's say water. Okay, we'll just keep it simple, water and oil, where you need a hard surface. You need a lot of high surface resistance to, being deformed or scratched or otherwise, right? But the brittleness doesn't matter. So again, and then there's that same steel though can be quenched in oil and get a tougher characteristic, right? It's tougher but not as hard. It doesn't reach at its most hardened state. So if you actually look at, which I've got one, I've got a book, I've got a little cheat sheet up there with a little speed dial on it, thanks to my late grandfather that was a machinist and a materials engineer. He took and he was the guy that had that stuff all figured out. But I have a cheat sheet. In that cheat sheet you can look at stuff like S7. Okay, how can you harden S7, right? Or right, and it will have several hardening techniques in their outputs, the level of hardness that can be achieved, what you will temper them back at. Some steels actually need to be immersed in a solution in order to be brought back in the temperature, right? Back to be tempered. There's a lot of variance to that. So the conversation about, like, okay, preheat your oil. The thing is if you ask people in an online community forum, should I preheat my oil? Right? Well, what steel are you working with? You know, what steel are you working with? There's people who literally think that preheating the oil makes it a softer quench. And they're speaking from a blade. But again, as Alexis said, it's increasing the viscosity. It's increasing the viscosity of the oil. So this way, more oil, you know, the quench is actually affected quicker. And so the conversations that are brought up around heat treat, 99% of the time, the answers that are given back to you are from the perspective of blades. And that completely changes. And that goes out the window with heat treating of hammers. How do I know?
Yes.
I've done videos before where
Yes.
I've been called everything you name it about heat treatment. I've got a hammer right now that I still use that's as quenched. It's a water quenching steel. It's as quenched in oil, and it's held up fine for my experiment's still running on it, let's say, and it's been 8 years.
I thought your little pound and a half cross peen that you use every day is the mild steel.
Nope, that's wrought iron with
Oh.
1045 faces welded on.
I thought it was butter.
No,
like
I was gonna say, hold on, Yamas, real quick. Just as far as fast and hard to slow and soft, the quench, it goes from cold water to warm water, and then cold oil to warm water, or warm oil to cold oil. So that's kind of the direction of speed of quench. Cold water quenches the fastest, and cold oil quenches the slowest.
Yes.
And it all has to do with the lead frost effect and stuff like that. And so, and somebody brought up, 5160 can crack in water. Yes, it can. It can. It doesn't mean it will, but it can. And I had an instance a couple years ago.
What a 3-inch chunk of it.
I was making punches out of 1/2-inch coil spring and chisels and whatnot, and every time I'd heat treat it, it would crack in a spiral crack going up the punch every single time. And I asked Roy, I was like, "What is going on? Why is this happening?" When you're sitting here, you've got this video that says to quench it in water, and every time I quench it in water, it cracks. And he's like, "Are you doing 3 normalizing cycles between forging it and quenching it?" And I was like, "Well, no, I haven't done that. Let me try that." And like I moved to doing 3 normalizing cycles, and it stopped cracking. I swear to God, it actually worked. And as much as I wanted to be like, "That didn't do it, Roy. You don't know what you're talking about." No, and so now it doesn't matter what the hell it is. If I'm gonna quench it, I do 3 normalizing cycles with the heat range step before I quench it, because that one thing that I was having an issue with, and Roy just brushed me off like I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and it's like, noob. But I didn't know.
Get wrecked, scrub.
And it completely solved my problem of continuous failure of punches and chisels and tools that I didn't know anything about. Carry on.
Yeah, you guys pretty much covered everything that I was going to go over.
Well, now you got the comments all pulled up like, I was going to read these, but
well, we lost that topic.
We saw a squirrel.
Yeah. One of the comments, and this will be the last one that I read because it's like the rest of them, they're surprisingly very positive and, I didn't know that, or cool, or whatever. Because most people who here, this is that confirmation bias, okay, in this, and not saying that you're wrong and you're only getting confirmation because the people who watch you believe blah blah blah, but that essentially you're not going to get a lot of arguments because the people who disagree with you don't watch you. So once this video goes viral, and I have a feeling it will, it may be one of those sleepers. You're gonna get a lot more comments, or if you take it and put it on a short, and get 10 billion views on it, you'll get a lot more comments on it. Where was it? Okay. Cheesed Cheese says, but how long does the iron stay hot on the ice one compared to a preheated one if it's just sitting on top? And my comment on that is, if you're heating a piece of steel and putting it on top, you're not forging. You know, you're heating a piece of steel and setting it on top. You know, you're when you're forging, your steel is on the anvil for a few seconds before you lift it up, turn it, and hit it again. You know,
and and to be fair on that, I mean, like if you're doing like anvil cam stuff and you're watching and you go into slow motion, like when you're if you're really up close, you can literally see when you hit it with the hammer, you can see the steel change temperature when the hammer hits it. Like in that split seconds that the hammer hits, you can see it get just a touch darker when the hammer hits it for just a second. So it's all a matter of perspective, I guess. I guess you could say, because yes, while if you stick something down on the anvil, it's that outside is going to get cold, and when you hit it with the hammer, that top edge is gonna lose a few degrees to the hammer. At the end of the day, it's still not enough to make a difference
Yeah.
on how much work
it's
time
not.
you get out of the piece
Mhm.
and the heat.
So the one thing I'd like to comment on the confirmation bias real quick. I'll comment on that real quick, and then I'll comment real quickly on the working at it. You make a great
We
point,
all love an
Yamas,
echo
by the
chamber.
way. So
I
yeah.
always do.
So yeah. So am I in echo?
No, no, no,
Or are
no.
you saying?
You're fine. I'm
Oh,
saying
okay. Okay.
you said you make a great point, Yama. As I said, I always do. So
Yeah.
And I said we all love an echo chamber, which is like saying,
Yeah.
hearing back the same
I
things that
got
we
you.
heard to leave.
I got you. I got you. Um, so I want to talk about the confirmation bias. So if a tree is a tree, it's a tree. So, right? Like that's kind of like an objective thing. There's a tree. You can see, oh, there's a tree. But people can be subjective about that very objective thing, right? People can say, oh, well, that's an oak tree. No, that's a whatever type of tree. That's a maple. No, that's a, you know, whatever you want to call it. But objectively, it's still a tree. So there are scientific facts, and there are math, and there's just well documented and well resourced studies and everything that's been done on this. So you can go as deep in the weeds as you would like. My problem is, so the only reason why I can have confirmation bias is because no one else is putting in the work to prove me wrong.
Mhm.
You can't sit on your fluffy little couch there, type in from your neck beard, oh, you're wrong. Where am I wrong? Showcase where I'm wrong with video. Put your neck out there, put your math, put your science, put whatever it is that you want to do, and we'll have the discussion. I'm happy to have that discussion. Link it up, send me the links. I'll watch your video, I'll comment on your video, but I won't comment in the way of like a neckbeard does. Oh, I think you're and your mom. Like I'm
I,
not,
I,
I'm
I
not
feel
interested in
attacked.
having those type conversations. So if somebody has if somebody has something wrong with what I say online, guess what? You have a cell phone that you're commenting from. You can film a little video of yourself proving exactly where I have messed up or made a misstep. You can take your time, your resources, your energy, and you can do that. And then, if I am definitely wrong about something that I say, right? Again, confirmation bias, right? We're talking about confirmation bias because I have a lot of people who say anything, right? Like, again, I'm a larger channel, so people are like, oh, yeah, you're great. You're totally right. Yeah, let's rule the day, right? I'm not interested in that. What I'm interested in is if you're going to prove me wrong, go ahead and actually prove me wrong. But your subjective truth of you sitting there and saying, well, I feel a difference in the anvil when I'm out there smithing on the weekend like I've done for the last 45 years. Big difference, pal. Big difference. I need something more than subjective. I need an objective truth. So if you show me an objective truth on camera and I'm wrong, then I will take my videos down. I will shut up about said subject. But guess what? No one's out there doing that because you can't. Because you can't. That's the fact. You can't. And there's my hot take on it. So again, anytime I have an argument, whether it's like hammer grip we don't want to divulge down that, like where to grip a hammer. I had to take and retract some. I said the best place to hold a hammer while swinging it was at the end of the handle to reduce the amount of kinetic energy. But see, that was subjective. I was thinking to myself, oh, it makes logical sense. The further you are away from the striky bit that's taking all this impact, the better off you are, right? But then when I reviewed it on high-speed footage with Thomas, Roy was wrong. Roy was wrong. And now I don't tell anybody that. I tell everybody that the best place to hold your hammer handle is about middle of the handle, regardless of length of hammer handle. But I had to change. Right? Because I could watch it on the replay and realize I was wrong.
Now,
So,
how do you feel about discovering you were wrong about that?
So dirty.
I mean, like for me personally, when I have a deep held belief or something like that, and I find out that I am wrong, I'm actually pretty freaking happy about it. I mean, there's that initial like, "Ah, shit, I was wrong," but then there's like, I learned something. There's this shift of I learned something new that I thought I knew, but I actually didn't. And so that.
I'll pair it off of that. That was the feeling. The very first feeling was like, oh great, well this makes me look like a real heel, right? This makes me look stupid. It's all get out. But then right after that thought, it was like, no, this is really cool. This is really cool that I'm in a place that I can actually prove myself wrong on things that I have held as a deep, you know what I mean, subjective truth, right? Like I have held this as a deep belief forever, like since I started, right? But now I have the capability to film it in high speed and prove myself wrong, right? So if I could do that, and it was kind of like light bulb moment. This is cool. This will be so much more helpful for folks, right? And then I had people still telling me that it's best to hold it up by the hammerhead, and it's like you can clearly see on video that does the most amount of impact and damage. They were saying everything from Thomas wasn't holding it right to, you name it. You're supposed to just pinch it between your fingers. I don't know one single smith that pinches their hammer between their fingers like this and smith. It's all nonsense, right? It's all foo-foo-y nonsense. So that's just a good example, right? So, but the echo chamber, like not the echo chamber, but that confirmation bias only happens when only one person is putting in the effort to have one side of the story, right? One side of the conversation. So it's good to have public debate and open forum, but bring your actual evidence to the table and let it be peer reviewed. Because on YouTube, I'm peer reviewed. And I am like student reviewed, and I am dum-dum reviewed, and I'm neckbeard reviewed, and I'm like every other type of review that's possible, right? And I might run into, I had a guy, just short story, I had a guy from another country. I'm not going to say him by name, but I had a guy from another country that was made very popular by another YouTuber on forge welding. Okay. I had made some assertions about forge welding. And the comment from this older gentleman that clearly knows better was like, you're dead wrong. You need to learn how to weld. That was it. That was like the whole subject line of his comment on my video. And I was like, who? And I recognized the name because it was recognizable at this point. I knew. And so I commented, I'm like, do better. Do better. And then he expounded upon, I've been smithing for, brought out the laundry list, how long he's been smithing for, as if I was some whelp that hasn't been in the forging industry any length of time. Brought out this big old long laundry list of, how long he's been forging for. And again, did not speak to what I was incorrect about in the video. So how can I learn, right? How can I learn? Make a video, produce a video where I'm incorrect. And the subject matter, I think, was around flux. I think it was around flux and fluxless welding and stuff like that. And that's another deep held belief. But anyways, we'll go into that at some other time. That's a big deep dive. But that was that was a person that's a very good smith. No, I'm not taking anything away from him. very good smith, makes plenty of forge welds, beautiful work. Nothing against that. But they came to another person and attacked them online with subjective truth from their own experience, and they did not actually do anything to help the other person on the other end, on the other end of the line, so to speak. So I don't have any interest in having those type of conversations, but that's what leads to those confirmation biases. You know, we
And
got to get around that.
and a subjective truth is something that you hold to be true, regardless of evidence or what have you. Whereas an objective truth does not require your belief to be true. It just is.
Yep.
Like water is wet is an objective truth. You don't need full flux to forge weld is a subjective truth. They're you know what I mean? So there is a
Mhm.
difference between an objective truth and a subjective truth. And most people can't see between the two. I mean, like, this is the way I view it, so it must be an objective truth,
Mhm.
and it's not necessarily the case. But
Yeah.
uh, boy, we're gonna get into flux one of these days, and that's gonna be a whole
Yeah.
can of worms. But
Yeah. I will say this: the very fact that you can forge weld without flux means it's an objective truth. Because
hey,
if it was a subjective truth, then that means there would be zero evidence in support or otherwise for it. It would be in theory, right? So it would be in theory. Somebody would just be saying, "Oh, well, no, obviously you need a gallon of flux to forge weld." That's subjective, right? Like you need a gallon. That's their experience. They got a gallon. But the fact that it can be welded without flux didn't say anything about good, didn't say about anything else. That's all getting into the subjective territory. So on a subject like that, like forge welding with or without flux, there can
Yeah.
be both subjective and objective truths, even within that conversation. And that's why humans should just keep on having conversations, right? Like we're having now. You know,
Rob Huff
that's
just put a
like me and
perfect
Alexis,
Rob Huff just
yeah,
put a
me and
perfect
Alexis are
comment out.
friends. You know,
Rob Huff just put a perfect comment out. You don't need flux to forge weld. I use it because I need it.
there you go.
And
actually a fair
it
comment.
sounds like a joke, but like literally, you know,
Mhm.
flux is a tool. When you bear it all down, like the process of fluxing something to aid in forge welding is a tool to aid in a process. It is not a necessity of that process. You either use it to make it easier on yourself, or you learn how to do it where you don't need that process added. You know,
And
so
that and
it
that's a fair
and
that's a
either
that's
way
a
is
fair point.
fine.
I've taken Roy's like example of you don't need flux to forge weld and like clean done I did a basket weld on a handle for a can
Fire poker.
barbecue spatula that I did a basket twist handle on that, and I did the forge welds on that without flux. Made out of 1/8 inch round or whatever, just because I wanted to see if I could do it, and then I wound up actually making the handle without any flux, and I was like, that was pretty sweet. Yes, I can do it, but in moving forward, I mean, it's like I do have a quart or pint or whatever the hell it is of Iron Mountain sitting up there. Um, Now, I have tried forge welds in the past with no flux, and I had them fail miserably to the point where the entire piece had to be started over because the forge weld didn't take or it cracked later on. And so I have the preference of I'm going to do a forge weld. Let me throw some Iron Mountain on this right quick after prep, and then and I don't have my chances of failure are less. It's not that I can't do it without flux. It's that I would prefer to use the flux and increase my chances of a successful weld and not having to start the project over. And I'm not talking about overusing it where I'm just like dumping cups of flux on it or anything like that. I'm just talking about, just a normal amount of, hey, I got my surfaces cleaned up. I've got a pretty clean fire. I think I got it going on, and I could probably do this without flux, but let me throw some on just in case. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I
Yeah.
mean, Roy might disagree because
No.
I mean, like he's so anti-flux, but
Yeah.
I like to hedge my bets and not do shit twice.
Yeah. So full disclosure. I'm working on this grill that I'm doing for my Tennessee conference, my AACV, my Murfreesboro conference, and the subject matter, these multi-bar scrolls that I'm welding up. They're very fine, finessey kind of scrolls, and I only get one chance to get them right. And you don't get a second chance. Too many hammer blows, you thinned it out too much, it's going to fall apart, right? I have been using flux to make those welds. I can weld them perfectly fine without, right, without flux. But I have a deep understanding on how flux actually works and what it's there for. And it is a cleaning. It is there to take and propagate out to pull out the scale to the outside of your joints. And since these are multiple surfaces that are all coming together and collating in one spot and being welded multiple times, it is impossible for me to drive out all of the scale that's in between all the surfaces at one time. So therefore I need the flux. It is not, however, a candy coating that locks out air or oxygen. It is not a glue. It doesn't hold the piece together. You cannot forge weld at a steel's forge welding temperature. That is all horse pucky. It's all nonsense. Okay, and I've been using some Iron Mountain flux in this. Why? I selected it because I don't have any iron filings currently to add to my own anhydrous borax. And Iron Mountain flux is essentially anhydrous borax with iron filings in it, or iron powder,
And
if
But
you
I
and
will.
thought
unicorn
And
feathers.
that
Iron
helps.
Mountain actually didn't contain anhydrous borax at all. I thought it was a different constituent altogether. But
Yeah, it says it on the bottle, anhydrous borax. So at least on my bottle, they may have changed the formula. I don't know. I just know on my
Yeah.
bottle of it.
okay,
In which case, by the way, I still have like a full bottle. I mean, I was given it like 3 years ago, and I still have a full bottle
buy a
of it.
bottle for
So.
$80. It will last you the rest of your life. I mean, they really it does last
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah. So, and even in that, as I was doing this class yesterday, we used some of that flux. We had one chance to get it right to make this little Baroque scrolly wall hook. Again, I'm working with a beginner. I'm working in my fire. He's not used to it, that sort of thing. And so, therefore, we hedged our bets, right, for success, for him to actually have a successful weld. But as I explained to him, that the Iron Mountain goes on different. It goes on different than just regular anhydrous borax alone. Because when you watch regular anhydrous borax getting sprinkled on the surface, it wets into the surface and then it soaks through the joint, right? It through capillary action, it goes and it cleans through your joint and pulls that scale to the outside edges of your material so it can be expelled by your first hammer blow. The Iron Mountain stuff, you'll see a residual. That residual that you see laying on the surface, and why they tell you to coat all sides is because
Uh-oh.
that iron powder sticks on that one side. The flux still runs through the joint, but the iron powder actually stays on the surface. It's not propagating through the joint with the flux. Okay, but anybody can do this just by observing it. Just look at it when you do it. And so again, full disclosure, I use flux in my shop, but I am very um, tactical in my approach and use, right? And so that's why I'm like the big anti-flux guy, is because I made this big long video where I ranted about that and I explained exactly when it's good to use flux, when it's not good to use flux,
Also,
and
yeah,
that starts the debate.
and also, if your flux boils up and does this whole thing, it's no longer anhydrous. That's why. That is the moisture
Mm-hmm.
included, the moisture that is absorbed into the boric acid, turning to steam. So, in order to stop when you sprinkle borax onto your stuff and it just blows up and it looks like it just moves away from it, if you put your borax on a cookie sheet or whatever thing of foil or whatever and put it in the oven at like 300, 400 degrees, bake it until it's nice and dry, let it cool off, put it back in. It won't do that when you use it. And much the same as I make sure my Iron Mountain is always with the top closed so it doesn't absorb any moisture. If you're not using Iron Mountain, you're just using regular borax from time to time. You got to cook it in the oven to actually make it anhydrous again. Anhydrous means without water. So,
Mm-hmm.
and
Um,
borax sucks up humidity out of the atmosphere like you would not believe. So if it's not sealed, it is no longer anhydrous. Just saying.
I would like to take a pause here and say two things. Number one, it is noon and Jack is going live. And number two, my internet, like my drop frames just shot up to like 30%. My monitor for YouTube is buffering like crazy. Something just happened with my internet. Yeah, Jack like
Okay.
hacked my gear and cut my feed. I think it's. I literally think
Good.
it's.
Then we should move into final thoughts then, eh?
Excuse to get off the stream.
Yeah, yeah. What's going on here? Let's turn that off. All right, is that better, guys?
Dude,
Okay.
I mean, like I'm watching the stream too, and the stream is flawless. So I don't know what
Is
you're
it?
talking about. Yeah.
Okay, no, then yeah, because I got this. Maybe it's just on my end, all the stuff
Don't get
coming
me
in
wrong.
and going out.
Don't get me wrong. There's the same 15-second delay, but there's no spinning wheel. There's no drop frames. I mean, like the stream
It just stopped.
from my end is
No,
flawless.
the bottom of my OBS was all reds. Okay. Okay.
So.
No, it's better. It's back to normal.
But in any case, it is noon, and we should probably wrap this up because Jack's live, and if we're all here, there's nobody gonna be watching him. So you know, to be fair,
Well,
to be fair.
to be fair.
Yeah.
All right. With that, final thoughts. Ice makes an excellent anvil, better than even a hardened steel anvil, and I think everybody needs to switch to an ice anvil. And Roy,
Right.
I really want you and Alexis to get a hold of Elon Musk, okay, and settle this. I need you guys to go up into space and film a video of you guys forging in space and then cold forging in a vacuum. This needs to happen. Make it happen. You two are the best opportunity to get that video made.
Yeah, no, and
Go forge in zero G.
Vacuum welding is a thing. That's why Teflon was invented, but it is no, by all means not practical. Today's topic was non-solid forge fuels, and for obvious reasons, liquid fuels are very impractical. Not only in the aspect of environmentally unfriendly, but also very inefficient as far as carbon used to BTUs released. So if you're just starting out, propane is probably a good direction to go with to start with, because you're not going to mess your stuff up with propane, and it's a good place to start with. And then if you don't have any other options, and then delve into coal a little later on. That's what I did. And I really appreciate the aspect of getting to figure out the ins and outs of working the hot steel in propane versus, and then later on getting my first coal forge and going, all right, let's see what happens. And and at this point in time, it's like, what do I need to do? Because each one is a specific. If I need to heat up a certain section of something to do a certain thing, I'm definitely going to use the coal forge because it's cheaper, it's more efficient, and I don't need to heat up 12 inches of bar to do 2 inches of work. But on the other hand, if I'm going to do something that requires more surface area, like if I'm going to do a twist on a distributor wrench for some monthly challenge, I'm going to throw it in the gas forge so I can heat the whole thing up to the same temperature at the same time and get it done in one shot and twist the whole thing so it's evenly, instead of doing it 2 inches at a time in my coal forge. So each has their own merits. Each has its own drawbacks and its own positives. And I think every blacksmith ought to have the availability of using both. I know me personally, I've got a propane forge and a coal forge at both of my locations, and any given time, which one I use is completely dependent on the project I'm doing and what part and what I need to do to that project. So, with that, you guys have a great week. Stay out of trouble. Get out into your forge, make something, be creative, and most importantly, have fun while you're doing it. And I'll turn it over to Roy for his final thoughts.
Cool. My final thoughts. So my final thoughts: coal, gas, use which is most efficient for the particular project that you're doing. If all you've got is gas in your region and that's all you could do is, just do a regular propane forge or something like that, perfectly okay. The point is to get your material hot enough sufficiently to do the work that needs to be done on it, right? So it doesn't matter whether that's what type of gas forge, what style, any of that. The whole point of what we do as blacksmiths is to make art, right? It's to make artwork, to make functional things, to be useful, to be in that process of creativity. With that being said, I'll say with my final thought, one of the great things about this discussion that we've had about the preheating of your anvils, and we went into, even though we weren't going to, but we did anyhow, we digressed into, forge welding with or without flux and things like that. Do not let your ingrained subjective truths and your ingrained beliefs hinder you from exploring other options. You need to do that to get creative, to learn. You have to open yourself up to learning. I am still learning new things each and every day that I smith out the forge and I spend time in at the anvil. I keep making new and better observations about this craft. And for me, I find that to be the most interesting, and I find that to be the most fun and rewarding part of doing this craft for as long as I have. So don't let things like, oh, I got to preheat my anvil. You have 2 hours to work, right? On your weekend, stop wasting an hour or 45 minutes of it preheating an anvil that you didn't need to in the first place, right? Get out there, start creating stuff, and let the old wives' tales be old wives' tales. So that's it for me.
Yep.
Have a great week. God bless y'all.
My final, yeah. Well, I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. Thank you all for joining us, and keep your fires hot and your anvils hotter. Oh, come on. Not a chuckle from you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll catch you guys all later. Fun 2-hour stream. Rock on, everybody.